And for the next half hour, I'll be reading from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. May 5th, 2026. Bowerly's family feud continues. WBEN talk show host Tom Bowerly's siblings say he manipulated their dying mother to cut them out of her will. The family has been duking it out in court for 2 years and counting. This is by Jeff Kelly. It's been 2 years since WBEN show host Tom Bowerly's brother and sister took him to court, claiming that he cheated them of their share of their late mother's estate. The three siblings have come no closer to a resolution, recent court filings show. Rather, the dispute has only grown uglier and more acrimonious. Among the recent revelations documented in court papers is the radio personality's ex-wife described him as a, quote, a master manipulator, unquote, who tried to isolate his mother from his siblings as her health declined. She said that she divorced him shortly after his mother's death, in part because of the way that he treated his family. Richard Bowerly described his brother as a looming presence in their mother's home, where the Tom lived during the last 2 months of her life, even recording his show there. I was able to communicate with my mother only with Tom's permission and on Tom's terms, he said. Tom, meanwhile, described his siblings as vultures waiting to pick the bones. Even as he took control of their mother's finances, he took title to her house, transferred money from her accounts, and helped her to change her will to his benefit. Text messages between the siblings prior to her death indicate that all three were concerned about preservation of her assets as her health declined. I wouldn't count on seeing a penny of that money, Tom texted his siblings, saying that their mother would not want to live this way and faulting her for not making better end-of-life arrangements. Hospital workers reported that the day before her death in a hospice inpatient unit, Tom Bowerly expressed his wish for hospice staff to cause the patient to pass. They told him at least twice that they don't do that, according to the report. He did not come to her bedside when she died the next day, telling a hospice worker that he was at peace with her passing and had a dental appointment that he could not miss. The dispute over Dorothy Bowerly's estate, worth close to $1 million, dates to May 2024, 2 months after the 90-year-old widow's death. That's when Richard Bowerly and Barbara Matucci filed a lawsuit accusing their brother convincing Dorothy, through duress, undue influence, fraud, and exploitation of her infirmity, to make himself her principal beneficiary. They said that prior to their brother's fraudulent and wrongful conduct, their mother intended that the three siblings share her estate equally. Instead, she changed her will 2 months before she died, while in Tom's care, to reduce their shares to 20% each, with the remaining 60% going to Tom. Investigative Post reported on the lawsuit shortly after it was filed in May of 2024. Tom subsequently denied his siblings' claims and accused them of defamation, libel, and slander. Much of the legal action since then has aimed to establish how and when Tom consolidated control of his mother's affairs, the amount of money and property in dispute, and most especially whether Dorothy was of sound mind when she changed her will. Tom, through his lawyers, insists in court papers that she was. A judge 2 weeks ago ruled that the evidence submitted in recent months by both sides, including Tom's own descriptions of his mother's deteriorating condition, leaves room for doubt. Both sides of the dispute, through their attorneys, declined to comment. Dorothy Bowerly, in 2012, created a will that split her estate equally among her 3 children. At the same time, she signed her Tonawanda home over to the kids, also in equal shares. Throughout 2023, Dorothy's health declined. She was in and out of the hospital. Barbara and Richard were her primary caregivers, according to their court filings, transporting her to medical appointments, bringing her groceries, and checking on her welfare. Tom was not actively involved in the care of our mother during the summer of 2023, Barbara said in an affidavit. In December of that year, her physical and cognitive condition worsened. Richard, in an affidavit, said she seemed generally disassociated from her surroundings. He said his mother seemed unaware on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day that it was the holidays. Tom seemed to agree that their mother had lost a step. Old lady confused, he texted his sister on Christmas Day. He also joked that he was thinking about ways to bump off his siblings. On the evening of December 26th, Richard went to Dorothy's house and found her on the ground where she'd fallen and suffered a gash to her head. He called an ambulance, which took her to Buffalo General Hospital. She spent a week there, then was discharged to a rehabilitation facility. At that point, Richard said, his brother began to express concerns about the cost of her medical care and her quality of life. Tom became very upset that I held our mother's power of attorney but would not call hospice, Richard said in his affidavit. This is getting absolutely ridiculous. She should not leave that hospital, Tom texted Barbara. She will end up in a nursing home, and we will end up with Buffick. The next time she falls, he texted both siblings, can we agree that nobody goes over there to postpone the inevitable? Tom texted Barbara that their mother was very confused, clueless, on New Year's Eve. Dick has the power of attorney and needs to put an end to this, he wrote. Dorothy was discharged from rehab after 3 weeks. Tom moved into her house to take over her care. He arranged for groceries and medications to be delivered to the house, his brother said, eliminating the need for Richard to do errands that he'd routinely performed. From that day on, Tom's presence in our mother's home became looming. He even began recording his radio show from our mother's house to ensure she was never unmonitored, Richard said in his affidavit. I was able to communicate with my mother only with Tom's permission and on Tom's terms. Between mid-January and March 6, when Dorothy died, Tom had his mother take her power of attorney from Richard and give it to him. He put her house in his name alone. He contacted an attorney to arrange for her to change her will. He made himself manager and beneficiary of various accounts that she owned, then proceeded to drain them, the siblings alleged in their lawsuit, making withdrawals and transfers totaling more than $793,000. Tom's attorney, Bradley Stamm, submitted to the court affidavits from a financial advisor, 2 lawyers, and an executive assistant from the firms that helped Dorothy make the changes to her will and give Tom control of her affairs. All said she was of sound mind, that she had, as one of the lawyers put it, full testamentary capacity to understand and execute the revised will and power of attorney. Stamm also submitted an affidavit from a neighbor who said that he saw her 2 or 3 times a week for decades. Her mind was always clear as a bell. She was totally competent and with right up until the end, the neighbor said in his affidavit. He said that she told him she wanted Tom as her sole caregiver and referred to her other children as vultures. Richard and Barbara's attorney, Andrew Debbins of Connors LLP, submitted a letter from their mother's priest at St. Bartholomew's Anglican Church in Tonawanda. During my visit, she expressed appreciation for all her children and said that they were of great assistance. Father Arthur Ward Jr. wrote, as her health deteriorated, however, her attitude and mental acuity seemed to also decline. Also in evidence, in a message from Dorothy's sister-in-law, Doris Bowerly Galbersarch, with whom she was close and ate lunch every week, according to the plaintiff's attorney. She wrote to Richard after Dorothy's death, affirming that Dorothy always said that she wanted her estate to be divided equally. Never ever heard her change her mind on this, she wrote. Believed with the state that her health was in, she absolutely did not know what she was signing, or she would not have done that. Medical reports submitted into the court record are mixed. In one report, a healthcare worker described Dorothy as alert and oriented. Another described her as unable to elaborate on symptoms and unsure about her current status. A month before she died, a hospice worker visited her home wrote in a report that Tom reports increased confusion in his mother. New York State Supreme Court Judge Emilio Colcovo, who is hearing the case, last month ruled that the question of Dorothy's mental competence seems to be very much in dispute. To get to the facts that he wrote in his ruling, the lawsuit must move forward, first to discovery and depositions, and then to trial. Absent a settlement, it's likely to get uglier. Consider the affidavit submitted to the court by Carrie Watson, Tom's ex-wife, who divorced him in April 2024. Watson said that Tom told her his mother was mentally declining and proudly described himself to me as a master manipulator. Tom's mother requested a meeting with all three children about their finances, Watson said, but Tom put the kibosh on that, insisting to his mother that he alone would handle her finances. At some point, Watson said, Tom took from his mother's house a pair of opal earrings his sister Barbara had given Dorothy. When Barbara asked for them back, Tom told her he couldn't find them, Watson said, but then he showed them to me and said his daughter was going to wear them to the funeral. Wealth is exiting New York, including Buffalo. More higher wage earners and other people of means are leaving the state than moving here. The Sun Belt is cashing in, and also pockets of the Northeast and Midwest, by Jim Haney. There's a lot of depressing statistics about Western New York and its economy. Our job growth is stagnant, and our population is shrinking. I came across the most distressing statistic in the current issue of Business First, based on IRS data. We, as a region, are growing poorer, in part because of population loss, although that's not necessarily the only factor. The adjusted gross income of people who moved out of metropolitan Buffalo in 2022 and 2023 was $311 million greater than that of those who moved in. It reflects a loss of some 3,500 people. Wealth is fleeing New York across the state. More money left than moved into Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, New York City, even Long Island, according to the data. As Business First put it, billions of dollars in earning power has been on the move, and suburban Sunbelt counties and high-growth metro areas are once again the big winners. The South became a domestic migration powerhouse in the aftermath of the pandemic. Counties in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas topped the census migration rankings, with larger cities often attracting 30,000 or more new residents annually. At the other end of the spectrum are some of the nation's largest metro areas, New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, and San Francisco, which rank at the bottom for net migration between 2022 and 2023. All had net migration declines of at least 39,000 individuals over the 12-month period. Those declines don't just represent lost population, they also represent lost wealth and earnings. Not that pockets of the North and Midwest aren't gaining. Our neighbors in Vermont and New Hampshire are in the black. Ditto for pockets of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Maine, but not here in New York, upstate, or downstate. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Erie County Legislature flunks the transparency test. Good government watchdog Paul Wolf asked for the appointment calendars of Erie County legislators. Chair Tim Myers said that there were none to be had. Now, Wolf is suing. Erie County legislators told a government transparency watchdog that they didn't keep calendars tracking their daily meetings and activities, so he tricked them into admitting that they did. And now he's suing the Erie County Legislature in state court, asking a judge to compel the body to collect and release the documents that they claim that they did not have, not once, but 3 times. If schedules exist, then the public has a right to see them, attorney Paul Wolf, founder of the New York State Coalition for Open Government, said in a statement that he shared Friday morning with Investigative Post. He noted that legislators earn $65,000 a year for what is considered a part-time job, and taxpayers have a right under state law to know who their elected officials are meeting and why. Transparency about how elected officials spend their time is a basic expectation of accountable government, he said. Here's how the records request turned into a lawsuit. Back in December, under the auspices of the state's Freedom of Information Law, Wolf requested copies of appointment calendars for all 11 Erie County legislators. He asked for all entries from January 1st, 2025 forward. Wolf does this sort of thing all the time. He frequently sends FOIL requests for public records, sometimes because he wants the documents and sometimes because he wants to test public bodies for transparency and responsiveness. The legislature's clerk, Olivia Owens, was certainly responsive. She got back to Wolf in a mere 3 business days to tell him that no such documents existed. Incredulously, he asked her if she'd check with each legislator to be sure. She assured him that she had. That claim raises serious questions, Wolf said in a statement. Most professionals maintain some form of calendar to manage their responsibilities. It's difficult to understand how 11 elected officials would operate without any record of their work-related activities. Several legislators are, like Wolf, practicing attorneys who need calendars to track appointments, court dates, and billable hours, that he noted. All 11 legislators campaigned for a re-election last year, an endeavor that likewise demands careful scheduling. Wolf appealed his denial of his request to Legislature Chair Tim Myers, who, as the head of the body that denied Wolf records, is responsible for its compliance with state transparency laws. Myers, a Cheektowaga Democrat, said the same thing as Owens. After a diligent search, he determined that no responsive records exist. Such efforts include a review of the legislator's electronic record-keeping systems and consulting with relevant Erie County Legislature staff and members who could potentially create, possess, or maintain the records requested, Myers wrote. Not satisfied, Wolf emailed 10 of the legislators individually, asking them whether they kept calendars. Myers told Wolf in person that he himself did not keep a calendar, according to Wolf's court papers. Only legislator Lawrence Dupree, a Buffalo Democrat, responded. Dupree suggested that Wolf file a FOIL request with Owens, the clerk, which of course he had already done. Wolf suspected that he was being blown off, so he devised a test. On January 22nd, he emailed all 11 legislators individually to see if they'd be available the last week of February to take part in a panel discussion on the subject of term limits for elected officials. Dupree wrote back the next day, "Thank you for the invite to what I know will be a robust discussion. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend due to a scheduling conflict." Dupree went on to say that he would be out of town for most of that week and already had events scheduled upon his return. A few days later, legislator Lindsay Larigo, a West Center Republican, replied, "I needed to see if it would be possible to adjust my schedule to accommodate. I can make myself available for this." A few weeks later, one of Larigo's staffers followed up looking for a firm date to put in the legislator's calendar. Wolf, in the lawsuit that he filed Thursday morning, called the responses from Dupree and Larigo an admission that directly contradicted what he'd been told by the legislature's chair and clerk. Both legislator Dupree and Larigo have confirmed in their own words that they maintain schedules and calendars, Wolf wrote in the lawsuit that he filed Thursday morning. The legislatures claimed that a diligent search was conducted for such records and not a single legislator keeps such records is false. Wolf's court papers included all the email exchanges described above, as well as 2 opinions from the State Committee on Open Government affirming that an elected official's calendar is a public document. In his complaint, Wolf noted that he had previously, through FOIL request, obtained calendars from Buffalo's mayor, Amherst Town supervisor, and the Erie County executive. Heather Murray, associate director of Cornell Law School's First Amendment Clinic, told Investigative Post that it doesn't matter whether the legislators keep their calendars on personal devices or use devices and software provided by the county. The use of personal appointment calendars or email accounts cannot shield public records of legislators from disclosure under FOIL, she said. If that were the case, it would severely undermine FOIL's purpose of holding government officials accountable. An agency has the obligation to gain access to these records and determine what should be disclosed under FOIL. Myers and Owens did not respond to a request for comment. Erie County Attorney Jeremy Toth, whose office is charged with defending the legislature in the lawsuit, declined to comment while the litigation is pending. Inside a derailed human smuggling operation, reporters from the Investigative Journalism Bureau exposed the lucrative and dangerous business by posing as migrants seeking to cross from Canada into the U.S. illegally. This story was originally published by the Investigative Journalism Bureau, which conducts collaborative research projects with academics and journalists while training student researchers and reporters in investigative techniques. In a rural farming region south of Montreal, a narrow trail slices through the forest, separating Hemingford, Quebec, from Moores, New York. Through text messages sent at around 2 a.m. on January 22, 2025, 2 alleged human smugglers prepared to send clients southbound from Canada into the U.S. through the snow-covered woodlands on foot. "Be ready, 4 people," says one smuggler preparing for the illegal crossing of his clients. "Copy," replies his colleague, who is awaiting their arrival on the U.S. side of the border. The messages and other details are taken from documents in U.S. federal court cases against an Indian national identified only as Shivam and Bailey Berger, a New York resident. The court records allege that Shivam coordinated the smuggling operations, and Berger's job was allegedly to pick the clients up by car after they enter the U.S. Berger has pleaded guilty to smuggling and related charges. Shivam has pleaded not guilty. Lawyers for both men said that they would not comment on the allegations. The case files reviewed by the Investigative Journalism Bureau offer a window into the lucrative covert industry of illegal migrant smuggling crossing back and forth across the U.S.-Canada border. While Canadians in recent years have been alarmed at reports of undocumented migrants coming north across the border, many are in fact traveling south into the U.S. More than 200 illegal migrants were detained on entry by the U.S. Border Patrol at the border in the 4 months between October 2025 and January 2026, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection data. The area allegedly used by Shivam and Berger is 5 kilometers west of Roxham Road, an unofficial border crossing. Authorities closed the road in 2023, demolishing the RCMP buildings that had been used to process the claimants. The strategies and techniques used by smugglers detailed in U.S. court records are remarkably similar to those identified in an IJB investigation last year into online smuggling advertisers in Canada. Reporters posed as clients to interact with smugglers and learn about their methods. In some online accounts, individuals associated with smuggling networks appeared in online posts with handguns and rifles. Like the alleged smugglers detailed in U.S. court records, those in Canada who interacted with the reporters used live location sharing via cell phones to coordinate operations, save houses for temporary shelter, and proof-of-life images that may also double as client testimonials on social media to attract new customers. The use of code words and slang is another common element used to signal a threat. In text messages, smugglers monitored by the AIJB use terms including camp, a reference to detention facilities, to flag potential surveillance by authorities. Similarly, as Shibam and Berger allegedly ran their nighttime venture last year, Shibam shared text messages that read, "Mission done." Authorities believe that means Border Patrol, according to the criminal complaint against Shibam. The court records say that messages prove the men were aware of police presence and attempting to evade law enforcement. Despite that close call, the clients eventually made it through. At 7 a.m. local time, Berger sent a photograph of 4 people dressed in winter gear safely deposited on the American side. Officers outline in the court documents that these are proof-of-life images showing the clients had reached their destination. It's unclear who accompanied the clients on the Canadian side of the border. Just a few days after the border crossing, on January 26, U.S. Border Patrol agents arrested Berger of nearby Chazy, New York. On his phone, authorities allegedly found conversation with Shibam in which they discussed the conspiracy to unlawfully transport undocumented migrants into the U.S. from Canada, according to the criminal complaint against Shibam. Based on the sheer number of messages and photographs exchanged, Shibam and Berger successfully smuggled migrants into the U.S. on multiple occasions, the complaint reads. A spokesman declined to elaborate on the case due to sensitive nature of ongoing human smuggling investigations with our federal and international partners. Text messages allegedly sent between Shibam and Berger, spanning roughly a month of smuggling operations, demonstrate how the live location method works from the inside. At 1:16 a.m. on January 11, 2025, Shibam first messaged Berger, "Bro, can you pick up from?" He then sent a live location icon indicating a group of individuals situated between Hemingford Road and Hogle Road, according to the court files. These roads run parallel to each other along the Canada-U.S. border, Hemingford, Quebec, and Moores, New York. The court files then describe green dots sent by Shibam that indicate the group will be traveling to Hemingford Road on the U.S. side of the border. Reporters first learned of the live location tactic being used in this area of the border during text conversations with human smugglers last summer. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Investigative Post. We read from the Investigative Post on Thursdays at 8:30 a.m. Your reader has been Jeff Shapiro. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. Welcome to another broadcast day on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private not-for-profit organization. Radio Reading volunteers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books to area blind and handicapped persons who are provided reading radios. As always, please stay with us. Our Reading the Buffalo News is coming up in just a sec. And feel free to contact us with any comments, suggestions, or any questions you may have.
Good morning. The following program is